Hello, friends, and welcome to your Daily Detroit, where we're sharing what to know and where to go in Southeast Michigan. It is Friday, February 10th, 2023. And of course, on Fridays, you have to have Mr. Friday. How are you, Devon O'Reilly?
I'm great, Jerry. I hope that's catching on. No way of knowing, but I've only been called Mr. Friday twice by listeners out in the wild, but that is enough. So I think we are getting some traction.
Well, one of the challenges of this is that we do this on audio, and we occasionally do a video thing. Like if you follow us on Instagram, Daily Detroit on Instagram, if you're interested, you'll occasionally see us. But when it comes to audio, it's more of when people hear us talk or we're wearing Daily Detroit gear. Like when I'm wearing my Daily Detroit Shield jacket. That is something where it's like, oh, yeah. But unless they've seen us on Instagram or something, it's always with the voice. Like if we're at the bar or if we're at a restaurant or something like that, it's like, oh, it's Jer.
Yeah, and I need some of that Daily Detroit gear, Jer, so I can get recognized even more.
Well, I think that can be arranged, sir. I think we've been wanting to do a bunch of gear for a while, and I think the time may be upon us.
Sounds good.
Well, sir, where have you been?
Well, Jer, I checked out a place nearby to where I live called the Potato Pit.
The Potato
Interestingly
Pit,
enough.
not the Potato Patch.
I jumped right in that potato pit.
Oh, into the Potato Pit. Is it anything like a ball pit, like, the kids go into?
A culinary ball pit, let's call it that. It opened up just off of Michigan Avenue near where the Bar Louie is, kind of in the downtown West Dearborn area. Only been open for, I believe, about a week or so. But, if it's that, it's very close to me. So I figured I had to go check it out. And we had it for lunch, my wife and I. It was good, but it's a heavy meal because here's the way it works. Basically, you start each potato bowl, with a base of French fries, poutine, cheese curds, and gravy. So basically, you're starting with poutine and then adding crispy chicken, meat lovers, gyro, buffalo chicken, Philly cheesesteak, shrimp.
So I'm guessing this is a good value for money pick.
It is. The bowls are about anywhere from about $12 to $15. So, you can get add-ons, of course, and they'll take the price up. But for that price, I mean, you could easily make this a 2-meal thing if you were willing to just hold off a little bit on some of the food. And they have different kinds, like I said. They do all sorts of different things with poutine. You can do, instead of fries, you could do tots. You could just do a baked potato, which I guess would be a little healthier. But they give you the option. So it was good. I liked what I got. And then they also, interestingly enough, Jer, the juxtaposition here, there is literally a juice bar on site called Juice Bar, but separately branded.
So it's the same space.
Yes, same space.
Okay.
Everything's run out of there. They do a lot of carry out, a lot of DoorDash. I think they're leaning heavily, smartly. It's a very small space. You could eat it inside, but there's very few tables. They're really leaning into like the DoorDash carry out stuff, which makes sense. But they have cold pressed juice. They have smoothies. They have fruit boats and fruit cocktails, non-alcoholic. Kind of like Instagram worthy type of stuff, pineapple fruit boat, this like big extravagant fruit cocktail. So a good juxtaposition with potatoes. So maybe if you're going there with someone and your significant other or friend is not interested in the potato situation, they can just get a smoothie or a light fruit bowl to balance it out. So it's a nice addition to the downtown West Dearborn area there. Glad to have them. They're not an everyday place, but look forward to checking them out again.
Did you think of Hazen Pingree and Potato Patch Pingree when you were eating those potatoes?
I always think of Potato Patch Pingree, Jer.
Like you need a bust of Hazen Pingree for your house, or maybe one of those like presidential style portraits from the turn of the century, but of Hazen Pingree. Like if I can find that on Facebook Marketplace, because, going on Facebook Marketplace is my favorite place to look for weird crap. This is what you need. And I've been to your house, so I feel like this would fit in perfectly with your whole motif.
Yeah, Jer, I don't have one, so I will happily accept any Pingree decorations or tchotchkes that you would like to bestow on me. I just try and make it down to the statue monument in Grand Circus as much as humanly possible. So that's the way I pay my respects.
Well, it's clear that your wife must love you very much.
Sometimes she comes too. We both pay our respects.
Okay, fair. I'm glad she's involved. I went to Hamtramck, sir.
Hamtramck's always a cool place to go to. I haven't been to Hamtramck in a while, probably not since, pre-kid. What's going on in Hamtramck these days, Jer?
First off, Hamtramck has so much life to it, which is so fascinating to me. It also is this great blend of cultures, so you really can get a little sampling of anything. And the newest thing is this Kitab Cafe and bookstore, which is right on Holbrook, just, I want to say west of Joe's Campo. And I'll tell you, it's shiny, it's new, it's got tasty Colombe coffee. I enjoyed my stay very much. It's kind of popped up recently. It's not a pop-up, but it popped up recently. There was a whole remodel of this building that I think at one point used to be a house, but is now a retail space or was a retail space. So it's got a real funky interior. Like you go in there and there's like a front porch sitting area that even they use kind of, although it's indoors, they kind of use an outdoor flooring material to kind of give it that feel like one of those like wood clacked together patios. Then you go up the stairs and it is a combination of cafe and bookstore. Now, to be clear, this is a place that is very much steeped in Islam, which doesn't bug me whatsoever. Like I'm curious of all things. And so there's actually like a bookstore built into this. So the two walls on either side are full of books. And then the cafe in the middle is really good. They had like the Avalon cookies, which of course I'm all about, right? That's a slam dunk every time. The coffee was really good. So was the latte. Tried a couple things. Sandwich, solid. It's much more of like a fancier to-go sandwich than like a full out thing. It's really designed as grab and go, which I'm all for because it serves an important need. It is what it is very well.
What I'm getting, because this is my biggest question, is when we're talking about coffee shops, to me, there's two formats for coffee shops. There's like the grab and go type of place, and there's the sit around, hang out, grab coffee and discuss type of place. It sounds like this is a little bit of both though.
It is. So I got in there. Let me think now. There was a front rail along both sides of the window, which great view of the street, which I really enjoyed. And there's a couple of tables in there. Then you go up the stairs and then there's a couple of seating areas, but it wasn't heavy on seating. So you could sit and people did. It was pretty busy, to be very honest with you. But then all the food was at the back. And as I said, the books on the left and the right. It's in an interesting position because Kelly's Bar is right on the verge of reopening, and that's got a complete remodel. And then you have the old stalwart of Cafe 1923, like 2 blocks away. So there's like all these things filling in for very like city style retail and places to go, all with different vibes right on the same street. And that's kind of the interesting thing about Hamtramck. Like with a little bit of effort and money, this could be the ultimate like city urban destination in Metro Detroit. It already is excellent. And just a couple of more tweaks. And I feel like Hamtramck would be, kind of, I hate to use the term, but like to the moon because it kept all of its footprint. As I've said on previous shows and for new listeners, if you want an idea of what most of Detroit used to look like before like the Great Leavening, before people fled out, Hamtramck is it. Go visit Hamtramck in those neighborhoods and you will see like that is what the east side, at least as I remember it, used to look like all across the city. Rooftops, duplexes, some single homes all tightly packed together. And it's really, in some ways, it's both a time capsule and I think a look forward, Devon.
Yeah, I mean, Hamtramck is just it's a cultural destination. It's one of the most diverse places you could possibly go, really, just in terms of the types of places you can eat and drink and the people you'll run into and talk to. Yes, Jer, that's our commercial for Visit Hamtramck.
Oh, yeah.
Sponsored by Daily Detroit.
I thought we were supposed to get sponsors, Devon.
Wow, we just talked ourselves right into it. I don't know. This is why we're just giving them away for free.
Well, let's get into some stories then. And I want to talk about the $2.5 billion development that, frankly, is getting a little bit less like social media and buzz traction than I thought it would, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm thinking of where I sit in my circle. I mean, it definitely got a lot of play in like the Cranes crowd, let's call it. So I've been talking about it with people for a few days, but I agree with you. It didn't kind of like permeate into the general population like anything to do with the Illiches or anything to do with Dan Gilbert or anything to do with Ford Motor Company or GM for that matter. And maybe that's because it is neither of those. It's Tom Gores, who should be pretty famous to most people. I mean, he's the owner of the Pistons, Platinum Equity.
But he's not from here. Like he's not of here.
He's not of here. He went to Michigan State, so he's of-ish here. But no, I mean, Tom lives in L.A., so he's an L.A. guy. Platinum Equity is mostly based out of L.A., so yeah, a little bit not from here. But then you've got Henry Ford Health System, which should be a well-known name going in on this, and I mean, it's going to be transformative. So I mean, I shouldn't have to talk it up too much, but I think this is going to be a project that rivals anything that anyone else is doing, whether they be Gilbert, whether they be Illich. The dollar investment is as much or more. I mean, we talk about the LCA stuff, and I think the price tag ended up being like 1.5-ish or something in the $1 mid billion. We're talking about 2.5 billion for this. This is going to be huge. We're talking hotels, apartments, a new tower for Henry Ford Health System. I really like their doubling down on the eds and meds, which is a kind of buzzword in economic development and urban planning, right? Which has been proven. The idea that, you build around hospitals and universities. If you have those things, that is the core of urban planning, economic development, creating density. And that's what they're trying to do here. And it's the perfect place for it. So I'm really excited.
And there's going to be that $1.8 billion hospital tower that you mentioned. And I think that's going to be a huge deal. Private rooms. I'm thinking about this here. This is located just west of the Lodge off of West Grand Boulevard. And it kind of makes me realize something that I know is a truism in my heart about covering Metro Detroit and the city of Detroit, is that when it comes to like the discourse about this stuff, it's often driven by people who work like in the city or worked in the city, and driven by people who are urbanists or people who are interested in the city, but very rarely, at least in the online discourse. Now, there's of course places that do. I'm not saying that it doesn't get talked about. When we're talking about the mainstream discourse, it's kind of like a fishbowl-y kind of outside looking in. And so sometimes the focus doesn't end up on projects that I think are actually going to be in some ways more transformative than the arena. Because you think about it, how many people go to LCA, Ford Field, the Tigers, and frankly, that is their entire understanding of what Detroit is. To them, it's, that downtown area, and then there's like this gap in the middle. Some might go to a few places, but most of the time they don't. Let's just be honest. And so there's kind of like a gap in the conversation that misses things like this where, yeah, this is going to be long-term a big deal because there's going to be people working like there's no work from home for a surgeon, right? And you may not want to go to Henry Ford or any hospital for that matter, right? Like just because who wants to be, having to go to the hospital, but it's super crucial to the economy and the things that they're going to be doing, adding residential to one Ford place, getting rid of like seas of parking lots for new residential developments, new commercial developments. I'm fascinated by the network of tunnels that they're going to be building underneath all of these buildings, which makes, at first you're like, that's bonkers. And then you realize, because it's a medical center, of course you want tunnels between all of these things for patient transfer, for, utilities, support, all those things. Of course there needs to be tunnels between all of it. That makes perfect sense. So to me, in a lot of ways, this is an even more fascinating project because of all the different layers in it than, say, an arena and a bunch of things that didn't happen. I feel like there's a lot more chance that this 10-year vision is going to happen. We can talk about a few more of the details, but what do you think of that, Devon?
I think you're right, but it's important, I think, for people to understand, and I know we have listeners from all over, this is not downtown. We're not talking about a downtown development here.
It's considered greater downtown, but this is a couple of miles away.
No, this is not downtown, Jared. I'll say it, and anyone who wants to argue is, it's not, Jared. We're talking about, we're up on Grand Boulevard. We're into the neighborhoods.
So this is new center to use, because that's a definition, right? There's the greater downtown, the 7.2, and technically it's in that vision of quote unquote downtown, the greater downtown, but it is its own neighborhood.
It is barely in the 7.2. It's a unique neighborhood. It's an area where there's a lot of single-family homes. You're not talking about any amount of real density, so to speak. It's very industrial. It's not downtown by any means. If someone's going to start talking about this is downtown, then you can just argue everything is downtown.
And you have the beautiful neighborhood of Virginia Park right next to it.
Yeah.
LaSalle Gardens.
You're not too far from Northwest Goldberg. These are like real neighborhoods in Detroit. So I almost think it's disrespectful to just try and like lump everything in this area and say this is downtown. To me, that's kind of BS. There's real neighborhoods here. And the people who live there would not tell you that they live downtown. So I'm pushing back hard on, this is not a downtown project, which is good. I think it's good. The point being that this is a outside of downtown multi-billion-dollar investment, which is awesome. And it probably wouldn't happen, of course, if the hospital wasn't there. I mean, that is the whole fulcrum of this, is the fact that there's a hospital there is why you can sink $2.5 billion into this area, of course. And you've got the Pistons practice facility. Yeah, it's going to be amazing. It's going to, create a lot of mixed-use development. I know, of course, people's ears go up and it's, will there be displacement? It doesn't really sound like it. I think this is really a value add. Like you said, there's going to be workers who are there already at Henry Ford Health.
Well, and a lot of that land has been bought up quietly by Henry Ford over the last 10 years, right? So I had a friend who lived right off of Holden Street there, where there used to be some lofts, and across the street there has been quietly held by Henry Ford for a long time. They have been quietly buying properties and amassing what they need in this area, and there has not been the attention. And even when people talk about it, there isn't the attention because it's not the Illiches, it's not the sports teams that people know. So, people pay attention to names they already know. And so this has been happening under the radar for a long time. Now, it's been talked about. People have mentioned it, but it just doesn't get the same traction. I think that there are so many parts of this too, 610,000 square feet of residential, that one Ford place that actually used to be the headquarters for Burroughs, and they were a huge concern here in Detroit. Like Burroughs was a big deal back in the day. So it's just interesting to see all those things together. Another thing I like is that tired old Hap building at the corner of the Lodge and Grand Boulevard, at least according to the renderings as it is now, it looks like that's where one of the towers is going to go. And that will be far more attractive. That building has seen much better days.
And it's such an iconic building, not because of its, it looks horrible, but I mean, like you said, it's right there on Boulevard and the Lodge. I mean, if you're driving in or out of downtown from the north or they're coming up from the south, you pass it, or if you're going east, I mean, you see that building all the time if you're driving around the greater downtown area. So for it to finally maybe be curtains and maybe we get a nice new tower there, I mean, hey, that's not bad either.
Now, Henry Ford is technically a nonprofit, I believe, correct?
Correct.
So I wonder what the incentive or what other brownfield packages. I imagine there's going to be some brownfield or some different things that come together, because this discussion is not really started yet with that because the board hasn't approved it, the stuff. Although they do think that they're going to get groundbreaking in 2024 if the board approves, and that's next year. I wonder what's going to be different about this package, especially I know that affordable housing in general requires incentives to make work, but everything else, I wonder how this balance is going to happen, especially because this is a nonprofit.
This can happen again because you have the weight of the hospital system behind it. Like that's big. That'll ensure that it gets done. And again, Tom Gore is a multi-billionaire. That'll ensure that it gets done. So I'm very optimistic about the project kind of completion and timeline. It is interesting. They do mention in the article that, yeah, of course, they'll look at any economic development tools and incentives that are available to them. Why not? You can't really fault someone for using tools and mechanisms that are already in place for things like this. So yes, I'm sure some kind of incentives will go into this project and we can have that discussion when it happens, but I couldn't begrudge a developer from using the incentives that are there.
It's all going to be what they asked for, and we don't know that yet. So this next story in Metro Detroit ended up in my inbox from Commercial Cafe, and I did not know this. Did you know that one of the top 20 largest developments opening this year in America is in Dearborn?
I would never have realized that it's that high, but I drive past this almost daily.
So I think you know what I'm talking about, the Ford Product Campus and Design Center that's kind of been on the drawing board for a while, but it's actually been under construction. If you go through there, over there, to give people an idea, it's over near Greenfield Village and all of that. This is 700,000 square feet of building. This is a comprehensive design that I think we touched on a while ago, but it's going to actually open this year, and it ranks up against all of these major developments all across the country. The top 5 developments are in New York. The first one is 2 Manhattan West doing 2 million square feet. So to be on the top 20, to see literally Dearborn on that list above Miami, right up there with San Diego, right up there with Charlotte, right up there with Boston and Chicago, Dearborn is right on that list with that sizable of a development.
It is striking when you're looking at that list and you see all these kind of major metropolises, these kind of global cities, and then you've got good old Dearborn, close to my heart, up there with the 17th spot in the Ford Product Campus. People talk so much about the train station, and we have talked about this, Jared. So this isn't the first time we're bringing this up, but people talk about the train station and how transformative that's going to be, and everything you say about it is true. It is going to be that transformative, and their whole campus is going to be huge. You know what's bigger, though, is this, just from a size perspective, because it's going to be their kind of hub campus. So if you think about what Ford's portfolio boils down to, they've got a lot of different interests, but they've got the Michigan Central project. They've got the Glass House, which we all know off of Michigan Avenue, the big rectangle Ford World headquarters. That's offices, that's executives, and that. And then they have this Ford Product Campus, as they're calling it, or Design Center. That's really the meat and potatoes of Ford, Jared. That's where all the engineers are. That's where cars are getting designed. That's where cars are getting tested. That's where innovation has come up with in the cars. When you get down to it, this is really the heart of Ford's portfolio outside of the Glass House and outside of Michigan Central. This campus is really where the products of the future are going to be ideated, designed, and tested and brought to market. So that's why I think it's really cool. And that's where it kind of, to give people an idea of like, why is there so much space needed for this? This is where the most people are going to actually work. The most Ford employees are going to be working out of this campus.
Yeah. And of course, I want to do something at Michigan Central Station, but also what kinds of tours they do offer. I definitely want to check this one out because I think this is going to be critical to a lot of people's like employment lives, and Ford is a big deal in this region. And this leads me to my next story about kind of the idea that Michigan and Metro Detroit is getting some recognition that they're really aiming to be the next Silicon Valley. This is in Newsweek, and it's called U.S. Automakers Aim to Make Detroit the Next Silicon Valley. Now, I will push back and say that Silicon Valley was the second Detroit, because in a lot of ways, I feel like the innovation that happened, that happened here in Detroit. It was, Henry Ford dragging in an engine into the Pontchartrain Hotel, like all kinds of crazy stories. If you look in the history books that will rival anything that you would hear in Silicon Valley, right? Like we think Silicon Valley is some sort of unique bird. Well, Detroit was that in so many ways in the early days of the auto industry and other industries that were here, cigars, like you can name it, stoves. There's so many things that went through Detroit. But I think that what this makes me think of is that one thing that was talked a little bit about at an event last night. Now, I moderated an event that's near and dear to your heart, a mobility event for Mich Auto that is just like a really cool get together of all the people in this kind of industry. And we were talking about EVs and VEA. But in the side conversations, autonomous still came up a lot. I feel like I want to bring that up because I think the autonomous future and where it's a bigger opportunity for Detroit is in autonomous and everything else but cars. We all know that there are issues with autonomous cars in general, no matter what Elon Musk says. But everything else, there are so many opportunities.
Yeah. Yes, Jared, a few things to react to that you gave me there. One is obviously the mobility meetup we hung out at, which is always great to hang out with the mobility community. There are some great events like these things, like mobility meetups, just so people know there's tremendous activity going on in the kind of next generation mobility space where a lot of people are talking, a lot of people are getting together. There's a lot of collaboration, a lot of open innovation between the spaces where people from Bosch and people from Ford and people from, startups are all getting together and talking. So that's really cool. That's happening. That happens every day in the Detroit area. So that's really cool in and of itself. Yeah, you talk about the difference, the posit from autonomous to EVs, and it's talked about in the article. And without getting too deep into the weeds here, essentially what happened is like 4 or 5 years ago, we were talking a lot about autonomous vehicles because it was like sexy. It was like, oh my God, we got self-driving cars. Everyone's going to be owning a car that's going to drive itself and all the capabilities and possibilities. The technology has not kind of developed as quickly. The regulations are just so thick and hard to cut through. And in that time, EVs have really stepped up and become a space that warrants investment, R&D, things like that. So a lot of the auto firms have been really focused on the EV. So now EV, electric vehicles and everything around that is really where the investment lies right now and where a lot of the development is. And you still have autonomous being a big thing. But to be clear, autonomous vehicles for personal use on the roads is the absolute last application for autonomous vehicles. Before that, it's going to be buses, where we're already there with buses. I hate to tell you, but there's buses.
Well, even more of them would be actually useful from a transit perspective because for various reasons, we actually have a driver shortage.
Exactly. We're talking autonomous buses, freight, cargo, autonomous rail. We're talking aquatic autonomous vehicles. A lot of the logistics, basically the infrastructure of our country, the logistics, the rail, the boats, the trucks, delivering goods and services, that is going to all be automated before we get to a mass adoption of people driving around in self-driving cars. And I think that helps. And mass transit too, I should also mention. Mass transit will be automated before we get to everyone driving an autonomous car. So it's important to think about that when you're hearing things about this conversation and about the future of it.
Well, and delivery, because I saw a lot of this when I was in Columbus. There's very well deployed over there where there's lots of little vehicles. They're like the size of a trash can and they go around and take your burrito or your DoorDash order or whatever. And if you could automate delivery, then those become businesses. Because in reality, in most suburban areas of America, and most of America is suburban in layout, Like delivery doesn't make any money and it doesn't make sense and it's expensive, and it's because of the people. If you could do hubs where you could have a low value target like your burrito, which RIP if you lose your burrito, that is a tragedy. I want to acknowledge that. But at the end of the day, if you lose a burrito with an autonomous issue, it's not that big of a deal. And you're also reducing the amount of outside things that it has to deal with depending on your service area. It's in a preset map, all those other kinds of things. That makes that far more possible, because the reality is that like delivery businesses aren't a thing unless you have a certain population density. And most of America, not just Metro Detroit, but most of America doesn't have much population density. It's mostly suburbs.
Yeah, the autonomous delivery systems are going to also be transformative there. Like you said, there's really bad margins, low margins, bad wages involved in kind of all the delivery services. People are utilizing delivery services now more than ever. Automating that not only on the ground, but in the sky.
Drones.
Stuff that's taking place with drone delivery. Like you're going to see that. We have a company in Detroit, Jared, and I want to shout them out because we're talking about it. We have a company in Detroit called Airspace Link that is basically the go-to spot for mapping the skies. So like when you're using automated drone software, when major companies, UPS or whoever are using it, they're using the back end of Airspace Link because they're creating all the different highways and byways in the sky about where drones can fly and deliver. So we've got someone locally working on the future of the drone infrastructure on a global scale.
Well, before I let people go, I do want to give a quick shout out to a pizza place reopening, sir.
That's always good. I mean, I hesitate to say that we have enough pizza places, but I guess that's not true, is it?
Well, no, and this is a reopening, so it's back into the market, and it's kind of made its own way over the last 8 years. But Eater Detroit reports that Belle Isle Pizza has reopened, and here's the other kicker. It's been picked up by Dave Kwiatkowski of the Detroit Optimist Society.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I know where Belle Isle Pizza is. It's near Belle Isle, of course.
West Village.
Yeah, exactly. That area. I haven't actually been there before because I never was looking for pizza in that area.
We have to send engineer Randy after this one. He's right around the corner.
There you go. We'll send him over there. And now, if it's a Detroit Optimist Society, I don't think Detroit Optimist Society has any concept that does not have booze. So
I don't see booze on it, but I wonder if that will be there. That would be a good thing. I mean, this is a tiny place. Like this has like a bench.
Nevertheless, Jer, I feel like
Ooh.
DOS only does booze included concepts. So this would be either extremely rare for them or they're going to do something cool with maybe takeaway booze or what have you.
Well, Belle Isle Pizza has a variety of kind of homegrown things, and I've had them before. They're pretty good. And they're going to be folding in some of the specialty items that would be more up your, because I know you definitely frequent the vegetarian, vegan, gluten, all that kind of thing. And so they're going to be adding some of those options from Grandma Bob's.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So they're able to bring some things across. That's a nice thing about being a kind of a restaurant group. It's great to see an independent proprietor was able to, sell and, find another stage. 8 years is a long time to run anything, to be real honest. So kudos to them. They built something that people really liked. And to see like this kind of place over in the West Village, there's more and more people and action happening over there. I think this will be a real boon, and a real boon for engineer Randy. So I know he's listening to this episode. So you have your homework for next week.
Shout out Randy. What I want to know now is I want Randy to do a segment where he pairs Belle Isle pizza offerings with tiki drinks.
Devon O'Reilly, it is so good to talk with you.
Great to talk to you, Jer. Happy Friday to you and all of our listeners.
I would be remiss if I did not give a thank to the team behind the scenes, Luciano, the Link Machine Marcone, Cheyenne, no Serini, who helps make sure that this episode is edited and clear, Fletcher Sharp with the Sharp Points on Sports. We've got a great episode next week with some signings and some intel about Detroit City FC and an exclusive interview with a player from the USFL Michigan Panthers. Ravishing Randy Walker, and of course to all our supporters on Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee. Crucial and appreciated. Feedback to all of our stories is always welcome at dailydetroit@gmail.com. Devon O'Reilly, so good to see you.
Great to talk to you, Jer. Always a pleasure, and can't wait till the next time we run into each other in Detroit or somewhere else in metro area.
With that, I'm Jer Stays. Thank you so much for listening. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around town.